This episode is brought to you by Thorn, and I have some incredible news for any of you that are in the military, first responder, or medical professions. In an effort to give back, Thorn is now offering you an ongoing 25% off each and every one of your purchases of their incredible nutritional solutions. Now, Thorn is the official supplement of CrossFit, the UFC, the Mayo Clinic, the Human Performance Project, and multiple special operations organizations. I myself have used them for several years, and that is why I brought them on as a sponsor. Some of my favorite products they have are their Multivitamin Elite, their Whey Protein, the Super EPA, and then most recently, Cinequil. As a firefighter, a stuntman, and a martial artist, I've had my share of brain trauma and sleep deprivation, and Cinequil is their latest brain health supplement. Now, to qualify for the 35% off, go to thorn.com, thorne.com. Click on sign in and then create a new account. You will see the opportunity to register as a first responder or member of military. When you click on that, it will take you through verification with GovX. You'll simply choose a profession, provide one piece of documentation, and then you are verified for life. From that point onwards, you will continue to receive 35% off through Thorn. Now, for those of you who don't qualify, there is still the 10% off using the code BTS10, Behind the Shield 10, for a one-time purchase. Now, to learn more about Thorn, go to episode 323 of the Behind the Shield podcast with Joel Totoro and Wes Barnett. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show Integration Wellness Coach and part of the Firefly VR team, Brian Kleindienst. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from his journey into the world of teaching, sales, ketamine therapy, ayahuasca, the power of virtual reality for breathwork, integration, and meditation, sleep, surfing, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of over 1,100 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Brian Kleindienst. Enjoy. Well, Brian, I want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Appreciate you having me. It's an honor. I'm looking forward to having our discussion here and just talking a little bit about everything from behavioral health and wellness, virtual opportunities to different integrative medicines, and talk about our beloved first responders. So I'm thrilled to be here. So thank you.
Brilliant. So I would love to start at the very beginning of your journey. So tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
Yeah, sure. I was born and raised in Southern California. Both my parents, I'm first generation actually born here in California. My father was born in Nazi Germany. They were Poles that were incarcerated and put in working camps. And my grandfather was just an amazing human. He knew 4 different languages. Actually, the German I should say the Allies broke lines, and he saved this town that he was incarcerated called Schiffelbach from being essentially burned, and he knew English and told that to the Allies, like, hey, even though we've gone through some bad stuff, generally these were some good people. Yeah, the Nazis had taken a lot of our lifestyle and life away, but have some compassion. So it's a really compelling. My grandfather was just an amazing human, and then the same kind of goes with what was embedded with me about from my father. It was just being compassionate and serving, and working towards others, be a purpose and service. And so my father was a Vietnam vet and a retired firefighter. So I kind of grew up in that ethos, right, of serving others, and seeing it and being in it. And then my mother, she was born in Mexico, in Yucatan. And so I had this yin and yang of these cultural differences, but just a beautiful family that I grew up in. And I traveled to Mexico, over the summers and hang out with my relatives in Merida before Cozumel and Cancun were what they were. I got to see it develop. So I've got a really interesting background, to say the least, from my family lineage, and my friends all call me, I'm a beanpole. So,
it took me a second.
Yeah. So a lot of good jokes and just, a great family. And my parents grew up in LA and then kind of migrated. They met together. They met at 16 and 14. They've been together ever since. So really, tight family dynamic, from both sides, from the Kleindienst side and the Buenfield side. So yeah, really strong family, upbringing and community, right? Big family traditions. Christmas is always huge for us. We have two massive dinners, Polish based and Spanish based. And then, my parents met and then moved down to further into Southern California. I live in South Orange County now and love it. I'm a big avid surfer. Love being outdoors and mountain biking. And I've got two beautiful kids that didn't have a choice either. They are indoctrinated into surfing and camping and doing everything we can outdoors. We're always in motion. I think that's important. And then unfortunately my wife passed away last year. And that was tragically and out of the blue. She was at my son's dive event in West Virginia. He was at Nationals. He's a diver for the Natadors here in Southern California. And unbeknownst to her or us or anyone, she had this big tumor, in her lower intestine, colon area. And it'd been there for 10 years. And the cancer wasn't what had killed her. It was the sepsis that set in so fast, right? And then they couldn't figure out how her body was shutting down, with dialysis and they had 5 or 6 ER doctors working on her or I should say staff. And it was just out of the blue and life hits you really quick in the face, as a firefighter and first responder, things can change at a moment. So yeah, it's definitely been a challenging year. But it goes back to kind of my family, and those roots and that love and community and support. Now we have a bigger family. We've always had a big family, but now, really leaning on others that want to help, from the friends group and the sports groups and the internal family, the main family. And so, it's definitely been, you know, I've learned, and I only learned through, what happened to me 5 years ago, which I thought was the greatest kind of gift, but it was the most painful. Was I suffered from really bad depression and anxiety, and I was just really lost, and that at that time I thought was the hardest thing I could go through, was just being in this this hell of being inside my head, and couldn't get out of it. And I did. I eventually did. I immersed myself into alternative healing modalities, and became a integration coach, and changed my lifestyle, changed the way I was doing things, but stepped into the edge of like being vulnerable and working on myself, and going through psychotherapy and all those things. Right. And if I hadn't gone through that personal hell, there was no way I would have got through, and I'm getting through, I haven't got through, going through it. Right. But I had these amazing tools that have helped facilitate, through these pain and suffering. And then also like having the capacity to look at my kids and look at how durable and resilient they are, and learning from that. So yeah, come full circle, everything happens for a reason, and that's a messed up reason, but I couldn't have got through what anyone goes through, like in when you lose someone of that, your loved one of that close in nature. If I hadn't gone through my own personal hell, I don't think I could have got through it as the way I have, So I take everything, and I work in the present moment. I try to be as present as possible, because we don't know when our last breath or moment will be here. And there's no point ruminating about the past, what I should have, could have done, or be in the future, as like where I need to be, or what I could be doing. Right. So yeah, man, kind of heavy to start here, but that's kind of it in a summation of my life, and there's more obviously, but yeah, that's kind of where I've been.
I mean, the sad thing is, we say, oh, it's a downer, it's heavy, it's whatever, but this is life. And this is why I ask these early life questions, because I mean, so many of us have a backstory, and normally, it plays into modern day as well. So firstly, I'm so sorry to hear about your wife. I mean, that must be crushing. And I want to get to that and that healing journey, but
yeah, sure.
Going all the way back to Nazi Germany and Poland, and then, the same kind of generation in Mexico as well, with this, incredibly mature lens that's been through such highs and such lows now in 2025.
Yeah.
What are your reflections as far as the multi-generational trauma? Because I'm sure, what your grandparents brought from each of those, and then your father in the fire service in Vietnam, when in our professions, a lot of times we say, oh, well, James, you were on that horrible, fire, or you were in Fallujah, or, whatever the thing is. And I think where we miss a lot of these veterans and first responders is, well, what happened to you before you put the uniform on? And then I'm realizing now, well, also what happened to your dad and what happened to your granddad? So, talk to me about any awakenings as far as the impact of generations upon you as you were going through your own struggles.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I guess I 100% there's generational trauma. I'm going to say that right now. It took me a while to realize it until I hit my mid 40s, because I'd seen what was going on, with my entire family. My aunts, both my aunt, my uncle, my two uncles suffered from anxiety and depression. Right. And they weren't in the armed forces, right? Both are psychologists and therapists. It's crazy, you know. And then I saw the trials and tribulations that my grandfather went through, the just crazy PTSD, you know, and it really, he was good at kind of burying it and masking it, because he had, you know, he's raising 4 kids from, you know, a migrant life, right? And raised 4 beautiful children, you know, that are all successful. And then when I was probably when I got married in my mid 20, or no, when I was 30, excuse me, he really kind of regressed and became really, he was not his outgoing person. It hit him really hard. I mean, it hit him his whole life. It's nothing. He didn't never forgot it, but it was a different kind of him, where he wouldn't leave the house. He didn't want to talk to anyone, you know? And I was like talking to my dad, like trying to figure this out. And you know, and I didn't understand mental health as much as I do now. You know, that was, you know, 25 years ago. And then it hit me, you know, in my mid 40s. And I know biologically is we can't run from our story. Eventually you're going to have to face it. Right. And there's only so much compartmentalizing you can do. And I was good at that. I was really good at compartmentalizing all the shit that I was processing. You know, as a young adult, I was always, you know, a high achiever. I was, you know, I was an adrenaline junkie. I mean, I did 20 some odd triathlons. I surfed big waves. I skateboarded. I rode BMX. I mountain biked. You know, I did everything that you possibly could that just pushed yourself. And then work career, same thing. I was in medical device sales, and, you know, just wanting to achieve and check every box off there was, you know, house, kids, vacation, cars, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then I was like, none of this makes me happy. None of it, you know. And then realizing, gosh, what my grandmother and grandfather went through, and my father, you know, it's definitely passed through through generation to generation. That, and I thought that was kind of a, I don't know, excuse, I guess, if you will, you know. And then I was like, wow, it happened to my aunt, and then my 2 uncles, and my father, and then myself, all about the same age, in their 40s. Right. I'm 53. I'll be 53. Geez, yeah, I'll be 53 next month. So yeah, it was, that was a big awakening, is like, this is real. This is absolutely real, you know, and how am I going to work through this? And, you know, being open to processes that were foreign to me, meaning I was used to being a lone wolf. I was actually called that work. Like, you know, that's Brian. He'll just work on his own. He'll just do it himself, you know, and that was just kind of my makeup. But I was missing community, you know, and people and help around me. I got it, but I was more just like hyper focused on, you know, completing X, Y, and Z, and getting it done my way. And it was pretty good, but it wasn't as, you know, open and nurturing as I should have been. And that was destroying me too. And then I was suffering from, you know, just always thinking about what I could be doing or should be doing, you know, and I was never happy in that place and time. Like, you and I would have a conversation, but I wasn't listening. I was, I got to go on to the next email or task, or, you know, get on a plane or work with someone or get on a surf trip or whatever it was. You know, I was totally dissociated, you know.
It's
So
interesting how a lot of us, I use the word us, myself included, um, you don't realize that you're using busyness to distract you from things that you should be
Yeah.
addressing. And so my community especially will have what we affectionately refer to as the overtime horse that will take
Mm,
all the overtime in the world. And you take a
right.
step back and say, well, why are you not going home to your family? And,
Mm-hmm.
in every case, I would argue, because if you're in a terrible relationship, then you need to address that. And if you're in if you love your kids and your wife or your husband,
Yeah.
then I would argue that you're busy when you're at a fire station. And so it's, you don't want that time where you just sit and contemplate and actually see the things that need to be seen. And to
Sure.
pull a beautiful proverb from your Mexican side of the family, it goes, they try to bury us. They didn't know that we were seeds. And
Hmm.
it's perfect. Like if they're
Perfect.
in there, it is going to come out at some point.
Yeah.
And we'll get into obviously psychedelics and some of these other things. A lot of times though, people don't even realize it's there. So,
Mm-hmm.
that generational trauma, it's not an excuse. I always use the phrase reasons, not excuses.
Mm.
It is going to have an impact on you. But once you identify it, once you see it, you imagine a sniper in the dark and then someone turns the
Yeah.
lights on. Oh, there he is. I can get him now.
Oh yeah.
Now you have the ability to act. So I think that,
Sure.
understanding that all of us are going to have struggles, and it doesn't mean that it's going to make you weaker. If
No.
unaddressed, it will make you weaker. If addressed, I
Right.
believe that truly is resilience, it's post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
But I mean, in my family, there's all kinds of horrendous stuff in my parents, grandparents, etc. And I think everyone else has that too. I haven't met anyone yet who, if you go back 2 or 3 generations, it's just this
Oh yeah.
Disney life. So I
Oh
think these are so important. And with as we sit here now, we're almost the same age. Our grandparents went through a world war. How
war.
can you
Yeah.
walk away from that unscathed? But we call
Yeah.
them the greatest generation. We said they just rolled their sleeves up. They were fine. They went back to work, and that's bollocks. They did
Yeah.
not. They were not fine, because you cannot be fine after that kind of,
No.
massive international trauma. So
Yeah.
unpacking this and identifying, these kind of through lines, I think then empowers us, our generation, to do the work so that we don't pass it on to our children.
Oh yeah. 100%. And that's what's, like you said, just this generation that went through a world war, and just basically said, yeah, roll your sleeves up, ignore it. And that's, then it's kind of rolled itself generation after generation in the first responder veteran world, is like the stigma of like, no, I'm a warrior. I can't let anyone know what's really going on inside, which is crazy, because, it's only going to nurture itself into just this self-destruction, and you're just going to cave in, and eventually what we've perpetuated is more this prescriptive kind of way of helping each other, right, rather than being proactive and getting to, like you said, the root, that seed, like, where is this all coming from? So yeah, like I saw, each one of my relatives suffer from some sort, whether it was substance abuse or, whatever crutch that they had, it was that mechanism to just bury, and then hopefully, I'll come out the other side, one day, and I'll be fine. But that never happens. That's an impossibility, so yeah, it's definitely real, and not something to ignore, but to again get to the root of where you're feeling that dysregulation, and where it's truly coming from within yourself.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to talk about what you're doing today and how that's going to
Yeah.
benefit firefighters. But going back to your early life, what do you remember as far as being the child of a firefighter, and the pros
Yeah.
and cons of your dad's career at that point?
Yeah. Definitely, this in just kind of like and I carried it too, I was watching this kind of like indestructible person, that can do anything, but just full of, bravado and strength, and courage, all those things, being gone, missing him, those days and times of, hey, check this out. I caught this fish, or, I got this good wave, or this game, that I was, at playing soccer or whatever, but I understood, it was for, a good cause. And I kind of understood that as young as I was like very, he was always on a pedestal for me, there. And he was very present, when he was home. Right. But then he had his own kind of things that he was working with that I could see, from Vietnam to, home life and work life, right? Like that distinction was totally different. Everything's slowing down at home, and it's like, like a trapped, mouse in a mouse trap, just bouncing off. So yeah, a lot of different, memories of that. But again, all good for me, and always, taught me about, self-reliance, hard work, being gritty. So yeah, it was a good way to grow up, for sure. And learn some real valuable life lessons early as well.
The, parents not being able to be there. I mean, no, person can be there at every single event, obviously, but that's something that I'm really trying to work towards, because the work week has just got longer and longer and longer as recently we're so understaffed. And this is the thing that you hear from children over and over again, whether it's your generation all the way through to today. It's that you don't hear them say, I was worried that dad was going to be killed in the fire. You hear them say, dad or mom are never home.
No, I mean? Right.
And it is a noble cause, but that doesn't mean that it has to be run by a skeleton crew. If the banker works 42 hours, if the grocery clerk works 40 hours, whatever it is, why are the people that we're calling on our worst day working 56, 80 hours a week? So this is what I'm trying to get the fire service to understand, collectively, in one of many voices, is to be like, you should be a firefighter. You should be proud. You absolutely sacrifice your time when you're needed, but there should also be the kind of staffing where you should be home, as much as the people that work in the town, the people that make the decisions in the administration building. So I hope we're going to see that the next generation of children will have their parents home a lot more.
100%. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's a complicated dynamic. And like you said, the economics of it, unfortunately are outweighing what real life is about, and the value of life. I guess you saw it. What's that fire was in Massachusetts, in the retirement home.
Oh God, yeah, killed all those people.
Yeah, where there was 30 off-duty firefighters that came to help because they were all understaffed, like you had said. So they said, the response time probably would have been better if they were up to full staff and not having to pull people out of their homes to come and help. So yeah, I mean, that's a prime example, just misdirecting what's truly needed and valued, which is, and, getting them the proper resources, to work these long hours or these hours. Right. So yeah, it's crazy that we're still in this state along our entire country.
Yeah, the false economy is astounding as well. I think it was 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. In 3 years, LAFD, I think it was the city of LA, their overtime budget was $1 billion with a B.
A B, yeah, not a million.
So in
Yeah.
3 years. So basically, 333-ish million a year on overtime. And this is,
Wow.
again, what you're trying to, I don't understand how the financial gurus in these organizations are
Yeah.
not identifying. It's like, if you put that money in to hiring another shift and give them a 42-hour work week, the money is already there. 300 million. It's just proactively investing. But I
Yeah.
won't go too deep down that rabbit hole. But it's it's insanity that borderline, dum-dum from England can see this. But, I mean, I'm sure the financial people in LA are probably earning, hundreds of thousands of dollars for their job. And I just don't get it. Working people into the ground is a false economy. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's bean counters, not understanding math and work and labor force and costs and operations. It's the wrong people. It's the bureaucrats in there that don't have a good idea on operationally how first responders work, and they need to collaborate more than be these separate silos. They've been working in silos, and that's the issue, collectively, and that's government as a whole anyway. I mean, it's waste.
absolutely. Well, speaking of careers, when you were in the high school age, what were you dreaming of becoming?
Oh wow. I was so into just into surfing. But I knew I wouldn't be a pro surfer. But I was like, I want to do anything but get a real job, and so I knew that wasn't real, and I wasn't going to sit long with my dad. But I always dreamed about helping. That was it. Like, no matter what, I was going to be ingrained with working with someone in some capacity. I always loved that symbiotic relationship, and what it was at that time, I didn't know, but I ended up getting a degree I never really utilized, but it was in the pathway of helping. I got a degree in speech pathology and audiology, and then came out of school, went to Europe, backpacked by myself for 4 months, had an epiphany, like, nope, I'm going to go into teaching. And so I went into teaching, and then that was a great experience, but I hated the going back to the government, the bureaucracy of things that just destroyed my fever for it. I love the interaction of being a teacher and helping, and I taught high school students, so that was really cool. And I hear this young kid teaching these high school students, and I looked about as old as they did, so there was confusion, like, he's a teacher. But I loved that aspect of modeling and figuring out problem solving and working with them, but the bureaucracy killed me, and got out of that.
Yeah, it's so sad. My son just graduated from high school, and I always give credit to the teachers that he's had, that, despite the environment they work in, he's actually had an amazing academic journey with some, so many. He was actually recounting it the other day. I mean, 10, 12 great teachers in his journey so far, that, made a difference in his life. But you watch the standardized tests. I mean, I remember cringing. I think it was in elementary school, almost certain. These kids are sitting in front of a computer for like 2-3 hours. Oh. And, so that they can do a test, it's not really about their academic achievement. It's to fulfill some bullshit parameters that school can then get funding. And I had, conversely, Pasi Sahlberg on the show, who's from Finland. And now he tours talking about the Finnish education system. And, if you don't perform well in America, you get, the budget cut, you get less money. In Finland, if it's an area where, maybe there's more chance of struggling in that particular community, they bolster it. They give it more, support, more funding, more teachers, so they can elevate that community as well. So you listen how, the organizations are, the nations that do it really well, and they're always at the top of that kind of, success list. And it's just so different. But it's not that we don't have great teachers, because I know great teachers. It's just we
Oh yeah.
shackle their hands with this kind of bureaucracy, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. It's my wife was a teacher, 25 years, teacher of the year 2 times in her elementary school, just had a master's in reading, taught outside the, had to teach to the curriculum and the mandates, but she always stretched more like herself. Like she was working 7 days a week. It was nonstop. Like she was passionate about like getting these kids more than what the standardized testing is. She's like, this isn't real life. She created reading programs that the school and district didn't have. She like at her celebration of life, we had 500 people come to her celebration, right? Like students flew from 25 years ago it like just insane. And to your point, we have beautiful teachers. We have great teachers. It's just the system itself is so broken. I think in the 70s, Carter started the Department of Education, right? And that was like, what hampered everything was that the central government took over the education when it should be done stateside, because the states know more about the student populations and demographics, right, than the government, which is a million miles away from what's going on. And I think, I don't know the exact number, but it's been 10 to 20 trillion dollars or maybe more lost, from that composition of the set in the 70s, where we're at the bottom of the barrel in aptitude in the entire world, which is insane. And I think I want to say it's about $30 trillion that we've invested since the 70s in that department, and we're at the bottom.
Yeah. I mean, again, going back to what we were talking about with firefighter staffing, this is what I see over and over again. I mean, I've said this many times on here, I come from a country that when I was young, national health was, thriving, but it was a very, active nation. Sports were a big part of school, and a lot of people carried on playing sports after they graduated, and food was still arguably food. And so if you have a tax-based system, and that inspires you to make your nation healthy, well, you save money hand over fist, because you keep people healthy. You just use a tax for pregnancies and, palliative care for the elderly and cancer and all these things that, that no one can foresee, like you said. But you look at our healthcare, and people, scream about increasing taxes and all that stuff. And it's like, we don't need another penny. We need to go in and fix where the money is being wasted. And, after the pandemic, there was one truth, the sicker and fatter you are, the higher chance there is of you dying, period. I don't care if you believe in vaccines or Chinese whatever it is. That is a hard, cold fact. And if you smoke, you're higher, you're also more likely to die. So address those. We were told they were going to make America healthy again. And what have we done? Remove red food dye in 6 months. Congratulations. That's groundbreaking. So this is the problem, is that the money is always there. The money is downstream in all these areas, including education. Our teachers shouldn't have to be begged the parents for tissues and pencils and paper, and then especially like you said, and then we end up at the bottom. But what do? We beat our chest and we say they're the greatest country in the world. Well, the politicians do, and they get people to believe that. It's like, no, we're not. And that's okay. There are some things that are broken, and there are some other countries that are doing it really well. And there's some things that we do really well. But if you walk around believing that guy or that, woman or whoever's saying it at that time, that everything is amazing and we're the best, of course, we're not going to fix it. But if you take a step back and you look at the statistics, like you said, with education, with obesity, with the opioid addiction, we have got so much that we need to do. But again, the money is there, because when we have this reactive financial corruption that we have, some people are taking that money. William Morris, Purdue Pharma, the weapons man, they're making a shitload of money. It's the nation that's suffering. It's the teachers and firefighters and soldiers and sailors and all these other people. And I'm hoping that there's going to be some sort of awakening finally, where people realizing, like, look, we we need to roll a lot of these things back. We were an amazing, very healthy country in the 50s, for example. So we
Right.
can get back there.
Oh yeah. It's crazy. Even like, taking it back to the government side, I think from the VA, or the amount of prescription drugs just in the VA given out to the vets was something like $309 billion of prescriptive cost, right? And then of the 900,000, I think that are in the VA, or let's call it a billion, I think it's almost $17 billion in treatment for mental health and wellness issues. So yeah, the money's there. It's just being funneled downstream when the shit's already happened, right? We're prescribing something that has been going on for hundreds of, or 20, 30, 40, 50 years and doing nothing about it. And what's that adage? If you keep doing the same, what's the definition of insanity? Well, you're doing the same thing over and over again. So yeah, it's just insane.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of that, you touched on, your own journey, as far as, some of the kind of generational trauma and the mental health side. Talk to me firstly from an occupational point of view. How did you find yourself going through the medical device world into ketamine, psychedelics, that kind of thing?
Yeah. It was, real transformative in a way that, I remember the last day of this device company I was working for. It was more of at this point, it was a SaaS company. It was a software automated company where I basically told the CEO, "Hey, I'm not coming back." And he said, "Well, what do you need? Some time off?" I'm like, "Yeah, I need some time." And he said, "Do you need a month off?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "You need 2 months?" I can do that. I'm like, "No." He's like, "How much time do you need?" I'm like, "I don't know. I need a lot of time." And he goes, "You want a sabbatical?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And I knew when I said that I wasn't coming back. And I didn't go back. I never went back into that field. And I went and worked on, and then I was seeing a therapist, and she's like, "You ready to do some work?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's go." And she's like, "All right, let's go to an outpatient group therapy." So I went to an 8-week outpatient, 5 days a week, 5 hours a day, very intense. And then she's also, "Hey, what do you think about ketamine treatment as well?" So I had psycho assisted ketamine therapy treatment as well, along with this group therapy. And that too was an amazing combination of like I said before, I was this lone wolf. I was working by myself, and she's like, "We need to break this habit, this habitual kind of aloneness that you've got," And then I jumped into, those two modalities that she said, and that changed my life from that point on, and jumping into, this group therapy and being vulnerable, right? Really open to, the process and listening to the group and knowing you can't bullshit them because they know you're bullshit, and then utilizing ketamine, which was an amazing dissociative that really opened me up to get me outside of my body, right, and feel again. And then with that through experience, I was prior to kind of making this transformation, I was also working a lot with vets in my I guess side time, if you will, or extra time. And I would set up surf therapy with a lot of the veterans. And that was my way of giving back. Like I said, I grew up in that world, and was always like, what else can I do? Even though I had not served myself, I want to be of service. Right. So I worked a lot with the veterans and getting them into the water, being mindful of this cathartic place, right, where you guys, vets and first responders, are used to running to the fire, if you will, no pun intended, right? I'm used to going to where there's action, and that mindset of surfing gives them that, but it also puts them in a place of being present and mindful of where they're at, right? Like separating them from all the shit and noise that's been going on in their head or at home or wherever it is, right? And so now we're putting them in a context of something bigger and powerful than them, which is the ocean, the wave, right? Like you can't mess around with the ocean. Like you better be there, or she's gonna slap you or drown you, right? So you've got to be there. So this lasered focus, kind of centered of surfing and this adrenaline, and then this creating this flow state with them, right? And then the physical exertion that goes on, they're having difficulty sleeping. So this combination, I had been doing. And then I said, all right, I'm loving alternative healing modalities and medicines. I love working with people. My gosh, what an amazing experience group therapy was, and ketamine therapy. Why not jump into being and learning more about plant medicines and psychedelics? And so I became a psychedelic integration coach, and then intertwined my past like teaching experiences and then of course what I was doing, working with veterans who suffered from PTSD and surfing. So I kind of just mirrored the two. They organically came together, when I was going through my own process, right? And that's what I was looking for, some purpose of like, what else can I do to help others, work with people one-on-one, right? Going back to my story of like, what you asked, what did you want to do? And I knew I wanted to work with people. And so it kind of came full circle, 25 years later, but in a way that I wanted to really guide and help people in a different way than what our, again, our prescriptive way of healthcare was going on. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
What was the lowest point you were at? You talked about the kind of disconnect, the lone wolf, the inability to fulfill through the life's check boxes. Where was the lowest that you found yourself prior to this kind of beginning of the growth journey?
Yeah. I guess it was just like, I was just full of anger, just vile anger, and you said it yourself, same way I would find every means not to be home, even though I had a beautiful home, and my kids, and I would take extra trips, for work, or I would say I was going on a trip and just disappear, and I could, that was my job. Right. So yeah, I wasn't living a true life, I was kind of living a double life, using, smoke a lot of marijuana, drinking, just doing all the things that, you wouldn't know on the surface, because I was good at like just burying it really. And then it just hit me one day. I remember my head like popping, and just spinning, and this ring wouldn't come out of my ear. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't talk. I was, comatose, if you will. Couldn't get out of bed. Wouldn't eat. Wouldn't work out. I didn't surf for a year.
Well, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, it was bad. Oh yeah, it was bad. It was bad.
When people talk about ketamine, you usually get one of two responses. Either they found it very helpful, or there's some that say it didn't work for me. And so far to date, everyone that I personally have met that didn't have some sort of, good response to it, when you ask them what did that look like, well, they came in, they put an IV in, they started the drip,
Right.
and then they walked out. Versus, actually having someone there to help unpack, and it's the same obviously with ayahuasca and some other things. If you're just
Oh, yeah.
taking the drug and you're not really being guided in whatever shape or form that looks like, whether it's a shaman or a psychotherapist, I think that's the missing piece of a lot of these therapies. So with your ketamine experience, was it
Yeah.
guided while you were taking it?
Yeah. So that's what turned me on too, was I worked with, obviously I had a psychotherapist. So it was a team, and then I had a coach as well. And that really helped me understand what, I had used recreationally, I had done psilocybin and LSD, as a kid and an adult here and there, but it wasn't with intention, right? It was which is fine. Like we all got our vices, and you want to detach and have fun and all good. But this was necessary for you to have that coach and that preparation, because these psychedelics have handles, right? And you got to understand each handle that they have, in meaning that it's not just doing the drug or the psychedelic or the plant medicine. It's you coming in with intention and understanding that it's if it was a magic pill, right? You and I wouldn't be talking right now. Like, I'd be good. I'd be sitting on a island counting all the money because I found this magic potion, and I'm good. And we would already have bottled this thing up and it's, little pill form, and we'd all be good. But psychedelics don't work that way. These plant medicines don't work that way. And you need to get ready for this aha moment, this bigger than you moment, right? This wow, what does it really mean to like dissolve this ego? Because that's all we're driven by, is this ego, right? And so, yeah, that coaching aspect is so important in prepping you for tool sets that you need to go in through. And that's where I kind of, procured these tools of like, working on breath work and mindfulness, right? Journaling, supplementation, diet, like all these things matter. It's not just, hey, let's go, James, let's do a heavy dose of psilocybin or ketamine or ayahuasca, whatever. Let's just jump in and we're going to feel better after, because these medicines don't work that way. They're going to teach you, but you got to be open and vulnerable to the process and give up control. And that's the hard thing to do, right? We're used to, firefighters, anyone, CEOs, moms, dads, it doesn't matter, right? We live in a world like, I want to control everything. You cannot control these medicines. It's if you do, you're going in, you're going to have a rough time, So that was an aha moment before I even did the medicine, was this control. Cause that's all I wanted to fucking do. I want to control everything. I want to control you. I want to control the next, step I was going to utilize within my family or work or the things I love to do. I want to control everything, and that was, I think, that's what broke me, was working with, the psychotherapist and this coach. Like, if you're going to jump into this, you gotta let that shit go. This is not going to work. And we got to do work before we even jump into, talking about or utilizing, the medicine.
You mentioned some of our mutual friends. One of them is Catherine Walker from Revitalists.
Oh, yeah.
So was your ketamine journey what that led you to her?
No, I great question. No, she's wonderful. No, I had hooked up with her through kind of reaching out and looking to see how she was working with first responders. And then we just gelled together out of her first conversation. And then she had me speak on one of her webinars to first responders, because I've been working with them for a year, but I wanted to get a little deeper, with first responders as a coach, right? But I also knew that the system itself from the ketamine therapy side or the ketamine clinics was broken, because, like you said, all you need is an MD license and a nurse practitioner to have it to start a ketamine clinic. I mean, that is bare bones, and a lot were like that, right? And so people were coming into them, going, okay, yeah, I'm having issues with anxiety, depression, substance abuse, pain, the list goes on, right? But then there was no preparation, and then on the home front here, I have a couple psychotherapists, neurotherapists I work with as a team, and then they would say, "Hey, I got a person for you. I want to defrag because they had a bad experience with ketamine." I'm like, and I knew exactly what it was. It was the initial preparation and no integration. So, long story short, Catherine and I had a good just conversation, and I presented to a bunch of her first responders. And then I did some integration work for her clinic as well in Tennessee as a telecoach, and that's how we kind of work together and create a bond. And then I was also gonna do some business development with Revitalists as well, as she was developing the her business out as well. So yeah, great woman, great pioneer for sure.
Absolutely. Another mutual friend, Jesse Gold, Heroic Hearts Project. So how did your paths cross?
Yeah. Same thing. I'd gone through a year and a half of psychedelic integration training, and then I went to Wonderland. I don't know if you ever had gone to that or heard about it. It's a psychedelic basic expo conference, very, very warm, small. It was 3.5 years ago. I went and met Jesse there, and kind of said, "Hey, I'm been working with first responders and vets, and I've been following his trajectory. I think in 2017, he was a banker and then got out of that, and he went through a whole ayahuasca experience, and then created this nonprofit for vets to get help, they were suffering from PTSD and all the behavioral and emotional traumas that they had suffered. And so I met him at Wonderland. We hit it off, and then he set me up within the coaching program, and I've been there almost 2.5 years, and that has just been a beautiful experience, working with all the men and women from the armed forces, and just being indoctrinated into that family, and learning so much from my clients that have come through that. It is like every time I'm done with a session, I just like that adrenaline and that dopamine and oxytocin and serotonin, like everything is like just rising when I'm done working with all the Heroic Heart vets and clients that I have. It is truly one of the best experiences I've had, and just the growth I've gotten myself as well. Like I said, this symbiotic relationship that I've got with my clients in there is great. And I have, dozens of friends from that experience that I've helped put through, we see them, we do about six sessions together, and then just nurtured these great friendships too, and seeing them evolve it's just amazing. So yeah, Jesse is an amazing human being too, just full of empathy and compassion, and just a smart guy on creating an organization that's also, very upfront in um, the being an advocate from how an advocate for changing how we're working with our mental health and wellness, at the government level, right? With lobbyists and fundraising and studies, right? So it's a really dynamic group at the Heroic Hearts Project.
It's interesting, seeing where we are now in 2025 and reflecting back, everyone listening who's a first responder, we see the ripple effects of drug prohibition, everything from the overdoses to the prostitution to the gang membership to the homelessness, et cetera, et cetera. But then in these last 9 years, in these conversations I've had, like João Goulão, who spearheaded decriminalization in Portugal. I've sat with him in Lisbon, and then we did a second one probably about 6 months ago now. And I'm listening to veterans who early on in the show were tight-lipped about drugs in Afghanistan, for example. And as the last few years, they're like, actually, there were opium farms, and we were told to burn it one day, not burn it the next. And you discover that the illicit drug trade basically funded Al Qaeda, for example. And then you look at these men and women, whether it's my population that protects the community, or whether it's war fighters that were out there fighting overseas for this country, and they come back and then they have to go to Mexico or Costa Rica to get the very treatment that know for the things that they did for America. You see, or it's starting to fall apart now, which is amazing, because there's no clearer truth that drug prohibition is an epic failure. I mean, alcohol prohibition was, that's why we know Al Capone, and they stopped it. But then Harry Anslinger on the back end of that was like, well, I've got to justify my job, and I'm a screaming racist, so let's do reefer madness and let's get this drug prohibition thing going. And that was in the 30s. So 80 plus years later, we realized, no, this is not working. And it's amazing to see the men and women, boots on the ground, advocating this. And I've had hundreds of people on this show whose lives have been turned around in part by some sort of, whether it's MDMA, ketamine, ayahuasca, ibogaine, insert thing here. But then you see the pushback from bureaucracy. You see, the OxyContin get approved by the FDA, and MDMA-led therapy being disproved by the FDA.
Right.
So it's clear as day. And going back to bureaucracy, whether it's education, whether it's a fire department, I think now people are starting to realize that in so many areas. I mean, take the funding. How much does it cost to fight drug prohibition? We're not talking about smugglers. We're not talking about dealers. They go to prison in Portugal. We're talking about the addict and encircling them and getting them the help they need. And also, as you said, all the psych meds that don't work. We're talking, arguably close to trillions, I would imagine. So the money is there to invest in the mental health therapies that actually work, and job creation and housing and all these other areas that Portugal does. And I think, all these psychedelics and ketamine and MDMA that we're seeing now, which is kind of funny. I was honest, on the very first fire application I ever filled in, I did MDMA and I did psilocybin in Japan. Mushrooms were legal when I was there, and they screwed up the application and threw it at me. Now here we are, and the same compounds are healing first responders. So, but I mean, just kind of rounding off that thought process, I think there is a revolution coming, because people are starting to have an awakening that this ancient plant medicine has survived the trials of time because it actually fucking works.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like, David Nutt, he was a British psychiatrist and neuropsychopharmacologist, and he published a study of these comparative harms, right, of drugs. And, I'll send it to you, but it's basically showing, alcohol as the lead, harm for specific, like, mortality, right, and dependence and loss of relationships, right, and it's literally, it's like alcohol, heroin, crack, meth, cocaine, GHB, antidepressants, then at the bottom, it's mushrooms, LSD, MDMA,
Yep.
where, like you said, we've morally, legalized the most destructive in alcohol. And what are the three most addictive? We got a smoke break, right? Cigarettes. You've got happy hour in alcohol, and then what am I missing? What was the third? Smoke break, happy hour.
I mean, you could add in the shit fast food as the third one.
Oh yeah, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, and so thank you. The sugars, right? And it's like, he lost his job as the UK's advisory council on the misuse of drugs, because it didn't align with where all that money was being tempered, and then asserting that LSD is less harmful than alcohol, which is crazy. And these psychedelics, and it's been proven in a study since, like, real intricate studies since like 2018 and 15, that and peer-reviewed studies, that they being these psychedelics don't have the addictive properties to it. Like, anything could be addictive. I could be addicted to water, right? Like I could drink too much of that, but it's not, as research suggested, that there's a lower potential of abuse than what the Nixon cabinet had purported about these drugs, right? So yeah, it's all in the messaging and who's messaging it, right?
Yeah, 100%. And then the tax too. I mean, I'm just thinking about it. In England, cigarettes are taxed, immensely. But how much is that also creating as far as resistance to completely eliminating cigarettes? And again, not making them illegal. That clearly doesn't fix the problem, but truly addressing the addiction to it if the government is getting a large tax kickback from that product. So I would argue it's probably the same with alcohol. If alcohol is taxed at a certain point, what are some of the resistance to actually getting people off it? Because I mean, I think that putting it out there and removing the demand for it is far more powerful. And it's the same with the illicit drug trade. I was talking to someone the other day. Imagine if, and we are the largest consumer of illicit drugs on the planet. Imagine if Americans didn't need drugs anymore. Or, like I said, we decriminalized addiction. So now if you were an addict, you were getting help. And, if you were on an opiate, for example, you were getting methadone or some of these other things that's helping you wean it off. But in the meantime, you're getting back on your feet. You're becoming a functioning member of society again. You're paying taxes. Now, what does that do to the cartels? And yes, they go into other areas too, but the drugs are still a huge part. Same with the Chinese with fentanyl. So, you cut the head off the snake by healing people. It doesn't matter if it's alcohol or, whatever the thing is. If people don't feel it as a void that needs to be filled anymore, they're not going to be compelled to take the drug.
100%. And just the scheduling, of how they're, classified, where you've got, opioids, as a scheduled, was it 4? And so there is, and in those it's like, Tylenol and Percocet and morphine. And then of course the derivative, and fentanyl, which is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, so yeah, it's just this miscalculation of where these psychotropics land and where they're at to help, our general population. And of course, then, like you said, big pharma, big business pushes all in on the stimulants and benzos and, the opioids. It doesn't end, right? So yeah, it's hopefully in this new administration we get kind of a reorganization there. Obviously we had some really amazing studies. Unfortunately, they were kind of pulled apart with MAPS, with the phase 3 clinical trials that they did with MDMA and getting, I don't know, 60 or 70% of those who received MDMA, but it was assisted therapy as well, right? No longer met the need for PTSD, or met the criteria after like 2 or 3 months. So, and I granted, I know they pulled apart, how the studies were conducted, but they couldn't, take away what was clinically found off a massive scale of patients and veterans going through that phase 3 trial. So yeah, we definitely got to look at how we're looking at our drug categorization, and how they're, what they're really doing and giving people access to help with depression, anxiety, PTSD, substance abuse,
Exactly.
So I'm with you.
All right. Well, shifting to an exciting new technology, talk to me about Firefly VR. How did you even come across that company? And then let's start unpacking what you're doing with that.
Yeah. Great question. Same thing. It was working in this psychedelic field and being an integrated health and wellness coach. It's a tough climb, right? Getting clients and making a living, and so I didn't want to necessarily stop doing it, but I needed more support in what I was doing financially, right? But I wanted to be true to myself and where I was going next in my next career opportunity. So a few psychotherapists said, "Hey, you got to check out what Dr. Romig's doing here in Southern California in Irvine." And he'd been working. He works a lot with veterans and first responders, but he's got his own clinic as well, an integrative health and wellness clinic using stellate gangliolite treatments and ketamine and hyperbaric chambers and red light, the whole gamut, right? But he was using Firefly VR's technology, this virtual reality technology, to help prep his patients with ketamine therapy. And I was like, oh wow, let's go take a look at this, because this is, I came from the tech world. My last kind of hurrah was with an AI company. And so I understood, these technical advances. So I had both minds going, right? I put on my coaching cap, right? And my tech cap. I'm like, all right, how are these two working? I'm really interested. And I went in and I said, hey, Dr. Roman, could I take a look at it? And he's like, absolutely. So he sat me inside of it, and I was like, holy shit, Firefly VR has something that I didn't think you could mirror as experiential and as grand and as concise as what I do as a coach too, like in putting my clients in the right place for the next step in utilizing ketamine. And so I came out of it and I said, all right, you gotta set me up with the CEO of the company. So he's like, no problem. So he shot me an email to the CEO and show man, and I hit him up and I say, yeah, we got to talk. And at any rate, we met at a second year of the Miami Conference of Wonderland. The first year I met Jesse. The second year I met Shell. I'm telling you, Wonderland, it was one of the greatest gatherings of minds from different fields, from psychotherapy, neurotherapy, technology, psychedelics, individual shaman groups and healers, right? It was an amazing event. So I met Shell at the Wonderland, and from there we struck a relationship, and I just understood what they were doing with this technology. And the beachhead product was initially for ketamine therapy, right? They launched it for, they saw a niche and saying, all right, we know there's a void in that market where patients are not getting all of the care they need to prep for a ketamine treatment, right? And so that just blew my mind, and seeing that. And then part of that team too is Robin Carhart Harris, which is, a staple in the psychedelic world. He was the first to brain map psychedelics, seeing how it's transposing within your brain and creating these different avenues of neuron, and of seeing everything kind of light up in the brain, right? And reignite, if you will, dead areas that had not been talking to one another, right? And so he was, so I said, oh shoot, then they really understand what they're doing, if they've got Robin Carhart Harris a part of the team and helping kind of develop the platform. And so from that point on, I kept pushing, and I said, hey, I'd love to come and work with you, because I think there's other places that we can take this. And that was, into the first responder and veteran world. And they were like, yes, this is good. We know this has, it's adaptable into being utilized in multi verticals within the behavioral health and wellness space. Right. They knew that, but it was a matter of starting somewhere. Right. And they started in the ketamine space. So we are working with a multitude of ketamine clinics around the country, assisting them in their preparation for their patients to get into that ketamine IV treatment. So the sanctuary, as we call it, is the actual platform. It's a highly modular technology or software component that is based around everything that we've kind of been talking about: cognitive, dialectical, ACT, all these psychological underpinnings that we get from psychotherapy are built in within the platform. All right. And then along with that is breathwork and mindfulness, all put within the context of it, so that the clients and patients are now using VR as a way to relax and become transported in these non-distracting, calming places. And then they're outside of, the noise that we've talked about earlier, and inside this place where this immersive narrative is creating a place to let go, right? And with that letting go is built in, like I said, these psychological underpinnings of dialectical behavior and cognitive behavioral modules. But when they're visually in there, it's stimulating the mind to use their kinesthetic learning state, right? So you're doing both. You're actually doing stuff, and then it's also creating this imprint on your subconscious mind to immerse yourself in the activities. And these activities could be, for instance, one of them is called letting go. And that's letting go of emotions that have been kind of anchoring you down, right? Anger, fear, shame, all those things. And so in that mode, or in that module, you're being taught to kind of let yourself go, self-regulate, get your central nervous system down with breath work, then actually physically like throwing away emotion into the fire, right? So you're doing something, So it's a really dynamic um, um, technology that allows you to be, you're not static, you're dynamic in there, you're working, you're doing, like we talked about. And then there's also, so it's basically broken up in like these two components. It's the fireplace where you're doing these kinesthetic activities, and then the study, it's more educational, where you're learning the why behind things. Why am I doing this breath work? What does intentionality mean? What are the biological components of breath work, and how does ketamine potentially work through your body? But we work, like I said earlier, we work across a multitude of different health and wellness cares, and that could be from whole health. That could be from end of life in cancer wards, right? It's for PTSD, anxiety, substance abuse and addiction, sleep, right? So a multitude of places that gets the patients to experience something that they haven't experienced in a while. And like, how does change occur when we're doing something truly experiential? Right. That's the way things change. And the beauty about this and why I jumped in this is it really does mimic psychedelics, in that it's when neurons fire together, change happens. And that's what's happening. We're creating these change states where we're creating this neuroplasticity. And now the mind and now the body has the capacity to create new habits and rituals. And because it's truly experiential being inside there.
So what does it look like as far as actually using it? Is it something that has to be done in a facility, or is it something that someone can purchase a VR headset and download the software?
Yeah, no, great. So there's a headset right there. I don't know if you can see it, but that's the headset. And we bundle the headset with the software in one. So, it's just kind of a one-stop shop for you. And we've got a multitude of clients that are utilizing it. We've got obviously the VA. We're in like 10 different VAs across the country. They're using it, like I said, in their sleep side, their whole health. We've got first responders using it at the agency level. We've got first responder psychotherapeutic groups using it. So yeah, there's always someone operationally overseeing it for their specific client or patient. And then we work with the end user, or I should say the client, one-on-one, in customizing the experience for their clients. So we have our science team, and we work collaboratively on how do you want this module to be aligned, right? And there's basically two ways we do it. It's one is called open play, where we've got a multitude of activities, and that ranges, like I said earlier, from letting go to planning positivity to breath work and mindfulness, body work, right? And then they could say, all right, patient X, go ahead and try these two modules, and they're 5 minutes each, or go pick, right? Or we have a more static way of doing it, which is on rails. And then you say, hey, James, you're working for your fire department, and you'd say, hey, all right, look, we really want to work on resilience training. Here, I want these 5 activities to be done in succession, and then here's module 2 and module 3. So we set them up based on how you want it to work, as far as your workflow or experience that, let's say, your firefighting crew, you would like them to have, or their peer support group. is leading. Or after a critical incident, you may have a specific way you want it to run for that individual department or agency that you're working at.
A lot of the audience are in professions where we're chronically sleep deprived. So let's take a dive into that. Talk to me about the VR system and sleep.
Yeah, I mean, it's powerful in a way that, like you said, I did an open house with I don't know, maybe 40 firefighters, and it was their first experience in it, right? And so I had a couple modules that I thought, all right, these will be good for this crew here. And so we had a battalion chief and an engineer, and the battalion came in, sat in on it, and he was, I think he was doing body scan. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was body scan. And the intro to body scan was just doing some basic coherent breath work. And so it was dropping him in. So right, everything we do is like how do we slow everything down? So, and when you're in there, everything slows down because you just detach from the station, the bullshit at home, the bullshit of the station, on and on and on, right? So he drops in, he's going through the session. This session is probably 12 minutes. Within the 6th minute, he's asleep and like knocked out of sleep. And that wasn't the intent. The intent was just, to get him to just kind of experience it. And we stuck an engineer in, same thing, fell asleep. And what was crazy was you guys are so adrenally taxed that they hadn't ever had a capacity to fall asleep, whether it was on duty or at home, because, you're always going, right? You're always thinking, that's just the mindset of a first responder. And so in there, that it was why it works so well is because you've got an internal coach working with you, and I know that you guys, have different organizations and activities and wellness opportunities that and groups that come to you. But what happens is a lot of times you won't practice it because they're not in front of you, right? And this then is that it's the coach teaching you all the things that they probably already had before, learning about breath work, learning about mindfulness, but not having a routine kind of orderly system that is experiential, that is truly knocking that adrenal system down, like putting at getting them regulated, coming out of that dysregulated state, and slowing down everything they do, that default mode network that's just been spinning. So yeah, but so that's kind of how it works on its own in educating, each individual about that anxiousness that they've got, or that that depressive state that they have, that these it gives them a sense of gratitude for where they're at, and that's how it works. But then we would work on a set of modules that helps regulate their, what you see as the best way for them to find a homeostasis, or a first getting into a place of where they will be comfortable in getting to sleep.
What about addiction? On the site, there's mentions of addiction several times. So talk to me about the application with that particular disorder.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's these purposeful intentions that they're not used to, it's to quell those cravings, right? And most of those cravings are occurring because they haven't been in a place where they can separate the two and recognize that all the things that they're going through with the therapist are valuable tool sets, right? So this isn't to replace anything. It's an adjunct to what they're getting, right? So it's a powerful adjunct because it's reinforcing what they're getting through in therapy, and what the tool sets that they've gotten from, the therapist and the group. So it's reprogramming, right? They're now what it's doing, it's creating new habits and rituals that they didn't have before. Their other habits and rituals were, I'm going to pick up, I have that craving, so I'm going to go grab that, that glass of Jim Beam or whatever it is, right? But here it's teaching them, oh my gosh, I have a whole set of tool sets. I can separate myself from, or I do have the capacity to separate myself from those addictive qualities.
It sounds like, what I'm getting, correct me if I'm wrong, that, like you said, if a breathwork coach or a meditation coach comes in and they give us a 2-day workshop, that's fantastic. But depending on the individual, they might be super diligent with their practice, or they may kind of taper off or not do it at all. But with this VR system, you're able to get those repetitions. So no different than us practicing throwing a ladder or pulling hose or, doing a mega code. You're now able to get in that immersive state, and the white noise of everyday life, once you go into this virtual world, because it's closed off, you're more likely to enjoy each of those and therefore keep doing it.
Yeah, it's this virtual experience is permeating essentially into your limbic system, right? It's slowing, it's helping, it's processing emotions and feeling. It's getting in that prefrontal cortex, right? And that the prefrontal is where decisions are made. And then what you now are doing is seeing like, holy shit, I do have the capacity to change. This was truly experiential. This left a mark on me. I'm searing away all that other baggage, and there is another self, and I am diluting that old ego, right? And so if we have the capacity to relax and foster mindfulness, right, and breath work, and then we're receptive to these emotional changes, or these kind of a new emotional components I didn't have. Okay, I'm more connecting to my deeper self, and then I know full well that, I've been going to, therapy for 10 years, and I just haven't picked up these tool sets. Like even these couple psychotherapists that we're working with that work with first responders, they love utilizing it as a mechanism where the first responder vet has sat and they've been in therapy for 3 months and they're talking about football the whole time. Well, they're not there for football. They just don't want to open up. Now this is the conduit to, oh, okay, this is a safe place. I feel good in here. Oh my gosh. Oh, I did have breath work before. Oh, this isn't bullshit. This does work. Because they're getting all this visual stimulation. They're getting this kinesthetic, they're actually doing stuff in there, and it's in like nice jaunts of time. You don't have to be, you can be there for 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes. You don't have to be there. You can be there in an hour. It's not necessary, but these windows of time are enough and guided enough to get them to a place that is of purposeful and intentionality and enhancing change, so yeah, that's the kind of the magic behind it, but it's ingrained with, these all these different modalities inside of it. That's kind of that awe kind of aha moment that you have. And that's what was just, kind of blew my mind was, wow, you're getting this. And it is, these parts of your brain are talking to each other. They haven't spoken to each other in a long time. This neuroplasticity is being stimulated, and growth is happening, just like psychedelics are. So it's a great mirror of the two. And that's why I fell in love and jumped into it. Was like, okay, I got to get into this emerging space, because I can only see how it's helpful to our health and wellness space, and all the bottlenecks we have, and there isn't enough therapists out there, right? There's not enough help. And so what else can we do specifically for first responders?
Absolutely. I think it's fantastic. I really do. It just makes a lot of sense to me. And having done meditation, the headspace, I use New Calm a lot, and that really, pulls you into an incredible down regulation or up regulation if you choose those ones too. But having that visual space as well, it kind of reminds me of when I used to go to chiropractic, we had to do all these exercises before they adjusted us. And again, you're prepping the body for the adjustment itself. Now, this time, especially with ketamine, you're prepping the mind for the journey with the counselor, or like you said, reinforcing work that you've already had. So it really does make a huge amount of sense. One more area before I go to some closing questions that I think is so understated, and it's because we're just so far behind in our profession. But whether you look at the fitness conversation or the mental health conversation, it's always about let's try and get less of them to die, let's try and get less of them to become addicted or take their own lives, versus what it should be, the ocean lifeguards and the special forces operators. It should be, okay, well, how can we get them to perform at the highest level and forge mental and physical resilience so they don't break? So talk to me about the performance side of this software.
Yeah, I mean, like anything, it's a tool set that is now going to be a part of your everyday rituals, right? And it's not haphazardly done, but done in a consistent way that you're immersing yourself into the platform and its simulations, and it's enhancing you or refining you to understand, hey, this is a safe and controlled environment. It's again, like we talked about before, it's an adjunct to what you're getting with that coach or strength exercise or psychologist or sports psychologist, whomever it may be, right? But it's not going to work unless you're open to what it's giving to you, right? But it's an engaging, multiple senses that you're not used to getting, whether it's the visual, whether it's the tactile, which it's the kinesthetic, but the magic behind it is it's leaving a lasting impression on your subconscious mind. That's the key to it. Like in any kind of training we do, right? Whether it's, enhanced training preparedness that you're doing as a firefighter, or trying to reduce stress and trying to reduce stress, it's you being open to what is being taught to you inside that module, and then taking it outside of that virtual world, right? Which is a great place. It's freeing. And then recognizing within self or yourself that I can duplicate that same activity and exercise out in the conscious world, right? And that's what this does. It mimics your subconscious. It's like it's laying these undertones that we're not used to having, because we're always, as we spoke earlier, checking the boxes or, doing what we think we should doing, rather than embracing ourselves in the process and becoming less judgmental about, what we're facing, so it's just an opener to reset and recalibrate everything that we've been initially doing, and opening up to a deeper sense of performance or levels or healing.
I can see as well. I mean, you can't get into a flow state without a calm mind. You can't absorb learning without a calm mind. You're going to be less likely to be motivated to work out with a busy mind. So, there's definitely a direct correlation between, improving mental health and calming the mind and the physical side and the skill set.
Right. Yeah. 100%. It's, that flow state doesn't come without work, right, and intentionality. But once you're in it, and then you've reprogrammed your mind and held space for yourself, that's a whole different level. And it's the same thing, like all these stress levels, these high cortisol levels that we have are associated with this chronic stress. And then, then it's associated with these various, weight gains or blood pressure, diabetes, and weakened immune systems. But if we're maintaining and using preventative measures, right, and that's, limiting the screen time we're on, we're getting, taking care of our bodies from, maybe doing self massages, getting vitamin D, eating a balanced diet, supplementation, right? So yeah, it's everything you're putting into it. And then, that flow state will come more easily when you've got a set of processes, rather than you trying to crowbar, into everything you're doing on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Well, I want to go to some closing questions if you've got time.
Yeah.
All right. The first one I love to ask, is there a book or other books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
Yeah, I would say Stealing Fire is a great book. It's basically how basically the Silicon Valley came in and worked with Navy SEALs, scientists, and revolutionized how they're all working together, or how they're creating flow states. Like, it's so apropos to what we're talking about, on what how do they harness these rare working places within the body, but also what's been kind of misunderstood in history about some of the psychedelics, some of the alternative medicines. It's a great kind of biohacking book for your brain, but from really high level performers that your audience can really relate to. And the author was he wrote the Batman series Dark Knight, so he's got a really good writing flair. Stephen Kotler that's what's coming to me. Stephen Kotler, and just is just big on everything we're just kind of talking about. So yeah, it's an amazing book. I highly recommend Stealing Fire.
Brilliant. What about films and documentaries?
Oh, films and documentary. What I'm trying to think. Gosh, I've been watching Mobland lately, and that's been really good. Just to get away from everything. But that's on. Now they're streaming it on Netflix. But Mobland is something I just started getting into, and just kind of going over the English mafia and taking me away from everyday storylines here, and just having a way to escape. But that's the only thing that's coming to me right now. I know I've seen a lot more, and nothing is coming to my mind, and I apologize.
No, that's fine. All right. What about guests? Is there a person that you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
Yeah, I do. I really think Matt, and he might be in your as part of our group that, like I said, we first kind of met through LinkedIn, and then I'm not sure if he's in your circle or not, but Matt Domiak, he's an amazing retired SWAT team officer, chaplain, spiritual director, former strength coach and sports psychology consultant. So I really, really highly recommend him. He's been a mentor of mine as well, and just really highly connected, and understands the body and mind and soul and spirit. And as well was a police officer in the SWAT division for 30 plus years. So yeah, I highly recommend him.
He's been on the show. It was probably I think it was about 4 years ago. That's been a while, but yeah, we had a great conversation. Yeah,
I love Matt. He's he's like I said, in the last 2 years become a good friend and mentor, and he actually did my wife's celebration of life, spreading of the ashes kind of ceremony. So he's just a solid dude.
Well, speaking of that, kind of circling around before we make sure where to find you. You led us through this growth journey that you had, and then you lose your wife. So talk to me about the tools that you had gathered and how that factored into this last year of grieving.
Yeah. I would definitely say I took from those experiences I went through, like I said, 5 years ago, and working on myself, but what was having those tools and going through and peeling away all those layers that I had, and being more open and vulnerable, and understanding myself, and understanding that, pain is part of life, right? But suffering is a choice, and we put ourselves through a lot of suffering day in and day out. And I was good at driving those knives into myself, and that taught me a lot about when my wife did pass, that, pain is that, death is a part of life. Pain, that is part of the journey and the process. And I don't need to suffer. I got to feel into those emotions, and not bury them, bring them out and show them to my kids. And I'm vulnerable and open. And they taught me a ton about the resilience that they have, like this crazy gear that my 16 and 13-year-old had, and losing their mother, and something I couldn't fathom. I still don't understand. I have my mom. That doesn't, as painful as this, that still doesn't resonate. I don't know what that feels like. Right. But seeing them and the strength that they have, and the daily reminders of today's a new day. Yes, things suck. Yes, it hurts, but we're going to get through this together, and just the capacity that they have to take upon things that are bigger than them, you know, showed me, I can do this. I can do this 110% for them. And I have to do this for them. And for myself too. I can't go back to, I felt there was a couple times where I felt myself going back to my old ways, and wallowing in the suffering, and knew that I can't go there. That's not a place for me. I can feel it. I can take in that anger and, and sadness, but I can't keep it anchoring me down. I've got to keep moving forward and be in motion and movement, be in community, right? Staying spiritual, all that's important. All these components are important. It's not just one. We've got to have a multitude of these healing modalities. Otherwise, we're gonna, if we're not leaning on to others, you're not gonna come out of those tough times. And that's what I really learned was power community is so important.
Beautiful. Well, I mean, thank you for sharing that too. It reminds me of Johann Hari when he's talking about addiction. He said the opposite of addiction is not the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
It's connection.
And I think it's true whether you're, a grieving spouse or whether you're someone, still trying to unpack the thing beneath the thing that's causing you to drink, whatever that is, that is the answer, is being around the right people, of course, not just any people. And I think this is what's so dangerous about this divisive push that we're seeing, where we're separating people and cleaving communities, whether it was during COVID or politically or whatever it is that humans need humans. That's why we lived in villages and tribes, for our entire existence until recently. And now we have examples where someone could be in the middle of New York City surrounded by millions of people and feel bone-crushingly lonely, because we need that community. So, I mean, your testimony has just underlined that.
Yeah. Thank you. No. Yeah. It's, we weren't born alone. Right. And so why push that, sense of belonging and culture and, unity when, a lot of us, and we see the divisiveness now, like, on our phones. I mean, that's this thing is, it divides, and from the doom scrolling to what I don't have, and, loss of connection and one-on-one, interaction, right. And socialization. It's crazy. And that scares me too. That's what keeps me up with my own kids, is, hey, there's a time and place for it, and they know that, but on a grand scheme, it's kind of scary where we're at.
Absolutely. I think the answer is community. It really is. It's just, stop looking, and I've said this on here so many times, stop looking at government buildings and fire chiefs and, all these people that put themselves on a pedestal. We didn't put them there, to supposedly solve your problems. Like, literally look in the mirror and then look around your own home. That's where you can really make a difference.
Yeah, 100%, James. You're definitely a man of wisdom and experienced a lot. So I really appreciate this experience with you and kind of taking me through this journey and learning more about myself too, as I was digging deep into some of those things of my life. So I really appreciate what you're doing here and connecting back with ourselves. That's super important. So it was cathartic, and thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. For people listening, though, where can they find Firefly VR? And then if they want to reach out to you personally, where are the best places?
Yeah. No, great. So love to connect with more of you guys out there in the first responder veteran space. fireflyvr.com or fireflyimmersive.com. And we kind of rebranded from Firefly VR to Firefly Immersive, but either way, you will find us. Both will work, and love to connect. And then as far as myself, I have my own website, doorstodelicminds.com. That's my psychedelic integration coaching site, and you can connect with me there. I'd love to help, give education, whatever it is. I'm here open anytime. I work with a multitude of clients, from first responders to veterans to CEOs, moms, dads, everyone. So yeah, that's the basic, two places to connect with me and Firefly. And again, super appreciative of what you're doing here and talking more, and gonna definitely send more people to your site, and there's a couple other people I'll recommend too offline to you as well.